Okay, all right. And we'll kick it off. So, sound check, Sean, everybody can hear me? Great. Okay, well, welcome everybody. We're gonna get started now. We're thrilled to have you. I'm gonna explain who we are in a moment and what we do, but you're here to get started using ArcGIS Online, and we're, as I said, thrilled to have you. So I'm going to introduce all of the folks that are putting on this workshop in a moment, but we are the Informatics and GIS group, IGIS. It's a statewide program run out of the University of California Division of Ag and Natural Resources. And if you are familiar with UCNR, then this will be a bit of a review, but if you're not, we are a University of California entity. We have folks all around the state in cooperative extension offices, research and extension centers, and affiliated UC campuses. I'm at the Berkeley campus, but we also have many other academics and staff throughout California. And we all of our work focuses on how to do applied research in agriculture, natural resources, nutrition, and youth development. And we really all of us feel strongly that we want to connect the power of UC with communities across California. Our particular group, this Informatics and GIS group, I'm the director, Maggie Kelly. We want to help you use tools that revolve around mapping or data to make your work better. And so we do that through these kinds of trainings, through a service center. We have research projects that we can help with, and then we also fly a bunch of drones. So that's just the bigger picture of where we're all coming from. There's lots of other statewide programs in UCANR. You might be familiar with 4-H or CalFresh or UCIPM. Anyway, it's a super cool organization to be part of. And who we are on this workshop here, I'm the director, Maggie Kelly, and I'm going to give the kind of intro presentation setting the stage, and then Sean Hogan is going to take it away for the nuts and bolts workshop. And if you have any trouble at all, we've got folks behind the scenes, Andy Lyons, Ben Satzman, and Robert Johnson. So if you're like, something's not working or whatever else, you can get on chat, and we're all here to help. And who you are, I usually make a quick map from the registration survey. So we are mostly California-based today. We do have some folks from the rest of the US and from Mexico, but to help us better understand who you all are and how we can serve you, if you would be so kind to put in the chat your name, and if you want to, a short blurb about what you hope to get from this workshop. But really, we're all interested in where you are with ArcGIS Online. Are you a beginner? So put 1, or are you an expert? Put 5. So who wants to be the first to head this off? Welcome, Naomi. Thank you. Great. Hadjer, is that how you pronounce your name? So tell us where you guys are, what your level is. 1 beginner, 5 expert. Tell us something about yourself. Saloni, welcome. 1, terrific. You're in the right place. Okay, Mika. Oh, great. This is coming in fast. Love it. Awesome. This looks like we've got a lot of folks who are really new to this. Total beginner. This is great. You're in absolutely the right place. We're going to get you started. Woohoo! We are cranking here. Lovely. Jeff said he built a dashboard. Okay, we got folks from Riverside, Hopland Rec. Lovely. Absolutely lovely. This is great. I'm going to close my chat and you guys keep doing that. But this is going, Sean, 5 on a good day. Same. 1.5 on a bad day. Same. Or when they just do a big update and I'm like, where is everything again? Terrific. So this is going to be a lot of fun. What we're going to do today, the outline for today is I'm going to give this sort of background presentation, introducing you all. Now you know who you are, you know who we are. I'm going to introduce you briefly to this concept of what is WebGIS, what is doing GIS in the cloud, what does it mean? And then we'll talk about WebGIS in Esri. Esri is the software package, the software company that we are going to be using. And the particular flavor of Esri that we're using today is ArcGIS Online, often abbreviated as AGOL. And we're going to talk about some basics around how we do GIS work in the cloud. And it's slightly different. It's actually very different from how we do GIS on the desktop. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the fundamentals, about data formats and things. Don't worry if you don't get them all right away. You're going to go through the workshop and these things are going to start to make sense. And because we're all thinking about making web maps or doing, sort of basic GIS stuff in the cloud, we'll spend a little bit of time at the end thinking about design considerations. So that'll be my part, this presentation. And then we're going to turn it over to Sean, and he's going to run you guys through this excellent workshop where you're going to get your fingers on some data in the cloud and doing some basic work, creating web maps and some basic analysis and publishing stuff and a lot of fun. So that's what we're going to be doing this afternoon. Really looking forward to it. So first of all, what is WebGIS? So we know what GISs are. GIS stands for Geographic Information System, and that's a kind of a catch-all term for anything we do when we collect spatial data, we analyze spatial data, we visualize spatial data. There's a full suite of analytical power that can be brought to bear on data that is associated with space and place. That's spatial data. So WebGIS just means we're doing this on the internet. We're doing it using the web or in the cloud. And so WebGISs can be thought of as powerful interactive tools for communicating and collecting data. They also are places where we can access data. We can view data, search it, query it, and export data. We can create maps on the web or visualizations on the web. Sometimes we think about these web tools are being designed for users who are not GIS analytical, powerhouses. We're really just WebGIS is a great place to start learning GIS, and it has the additional benefit of being, enabling you to communicate very effectively with many more people. And there's a couple of snapshots here on the right. One of them is this COVID dashboard, which I'm sure we're all familiar with from our experience with COVID. And this was produced by Johns Hopkins really early on. You've all seen these kind of dashboards. This is a web mapping application called Dashboards that Esri has promoted and has been adopted worldwide. One of them is the COVID dashboards. And down below is another web map. It's a little bit blurry. Sorry about that. But this is showing fire spread. So there's a lot of these really quickly created, very impactful tools out there that unite GIS, so spatial data, and the web. And when we talk about WebGIS, we can talk about doing these in an open source or free way. And there are lots of ways to do this: Google Maps API, CartoDB, Mapbox, these sorts of things. We can also think about doing these in a proprietary way using somebody's software that requires a license. That's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be using ArcGIS Online. But this slide is just to show you that we're doing an entry into a particular software package, ArcGIS Online, that's associated with a company. So we're in the proprietary space. There are lots of alternatives, but ArcGIS Online is a great place to start. And indeed, it really there's a lot of capacity behind it that you can build on. So in the Esri world, when we talk about WebGIS, we talk about web maps and web apps. And web maps are these map examples shown via a browser. And web apps are these sort of additional functionality. One of them might be the dashboard that I mentioned before. The Johns Hopkins COVID dashboard is a particular web app the fire mapping, tracing the fire maps, finding out where you are in location in relation to fire spread. That's a web app. Story maps, many of you might have heard of story maps. That is a web app. And then another web application is field maps that I'm addicted to. Every time I go for a walk, I trace where I'm going so I can see my paths. Those are web apps, web applications, slightly more complicated than web maps, but a web map, which is just a map on the web, is going to serve all of these more complex tools. So web maps are basic online maps with custom symbology. You can, as the creator, you can limit the layout options. You can sort of control all of the features that are included in the web map. There are some analytical capacities that ArcGIS Online makes available to you. And web applications are a little bit more complex. These are graphically appealing. There's more control over layout options. You can add additional widgets to them. And as I said, Esri makes available to us some very, very powerful ones: story maps, dashboards, smartphone apps. These are all examples. And often these web applications resemble a standalone web page, but they have integrated in them all these other components like dashboard or texts or videos or many other things in addition to maps. So I mentioned there's lots of ways to do this, and we are here talking about ArcGIS Online. So why is ArcGIS Online useful, or why might you be interested in it? And some of the reasons you might be interested in are because you want to create web maps and web apps, and you want to link those with loads of other things like field maps, that the field mapping application I talked about, or story maps or dashboards. These are all available to you through ArcGIS Online. You might want to perform some simple GIS analysis like spread or movement, or show me the pattern of my particular things, or show me, I have all of these counties. Can you summarize some information within counties? All of these kind of simple spatial analyses are possible, and more analysis capacity is coming every day with ArcGIS Online. And then one really strong reason why you might want to use ArcGIS Online is it's a portal. It opens up so many data repositories. So there's so much data that you can use when you link in through ArcGIS Online. It's fast, it's intuitive, it's browser-based. So you're not having to download and install software on your desktop. You're just working in the cloud. So it makes things very much simpler. And we are in the Esri world. Again, we're going to be focused on that. And ArcGIS Online makes this kind of pipeline from finding data to designing your maps to creating or developing these web applications really, really straightforward. Like I said, ArcGIS Online opens up tons of data portals. We're going to do a little bit of that today. You can design your maps, control symbology, control your typology. You can control all sorts of features, and then you can push those web maps into these more complicated web applications. ArcGIS Online doesn't do everything perfectly. Some really refined cartography and design might be better in desktop software packages like ArcGIS Pro or Adobe Suite. I prefer to do all my publication quality maps on desktop, not on ArcGIS Online, but there probably are schools of thought there. This is sort of a GIS technical thing, but there's less projection control, and projections are just the way in which your 3D the 3D surface of the Earth is made into two dimensionals, 2D, X and Y. And so there's more projection control on the desktop application, but that's sort of a minor case. And then there's more analytical power in the desktop, in this case, ArcGIS Pro, but more and more is coming to ArcGIS Online almost every day. It's really pretty impressive. But in general, if I'm doing any high-level remote sensing or spatial modeling or working with drone data or LiDAR data, and doing more coding, I'm working on the desktop, although I think that's definitely going to radically change, very, very quickly. All right. Again, we're in the Esri world. I just put this slide up so we can orient ourselves, because the next few slides are going to be thinking about how we move back and forth between desktop to cloud. And as I said, there are some differences. So let's get oriented here. In the Esri world, the desktop, the local application is called ArcGIS Pro. You get a license, you install it on your computer. You work locally and you work with local data. When we're in ArcGIS Online, which we're going to be doing today, we're in the cloud. So we don't have to install a software or a license on our computer. We're working in the browser. And there's a lot of advantages to that. There's a lot of strengths to working in the cloud. Like I said, we create all our web maps and web apps. We can link to all these other really powerful applications. We can do a lot of analysis. It's very fast. It's very intuitive. It's browser-based. This is how we're going to be teaching GIS in the future, for sure. But when there are some things that we need to do locally, we need to work, for example, in Pro. I said before, there's more design control in cartography. There's more control of projections and a lot of advanced analysis you want to do locally. But again, the analysis capacity in the cloud is really changing. But in both, in Pro, and we have workshops, intro to Pro coming up later, or when you're working in the cloud in ArcGIS Online, you have access to loads of data. And that's been a real game changer in my career, is just the ability to find data. And all of these little icons around the cloud up here, those are all these additional applications that Esri makes available to you. Field maps, story maps, dashboards, all these kinds of things. So I hope you're getting the sense of how all of these moving parts fit together. But just to make sure we're all on the same page, when we move back and forth between local stuff and cloud stuff, so moving from Pro up to ArcGIS Online and back again, we have to talk about data and data formats. And so if you guys are GIS, typical GIS people out there who learned on a desktop ArcMap or Pro, you're used to these kind of file formats. And if you're brand new to GIS, this isn't even don't even worry about this. You're gonna, encounter it maybe later, but local file formats are things like shape files or grids or geodatabases. You can, email them to your colleagues in a zipped format. You can bring them into Pro. They're local formats. They are very traditional and we've been using them for decades. When we talk about data in the cloud, we don't talk about data in the same way. We have cloud file formats. And with spatial data, cloud file formats are essentially layers, which is the data plus any symbology that's attached to that, and services. And these are bundled together. And the layer is the data itself and how it's visualized. And the service is how whoever's using it can use it. You can put constraints on how these data that you're producing are used. Conversely, when you grab data in the cloud, in a native cloud format, you have to be cognizant of what the services are attached to them, because there might be some restrictions. So this is just repeating what I said. When we interact with data in the cloud, in ArcGIS Online, we talk about data as layers. And we're going to talk about feature layers or imagery layers, and those correspond to vector and raster data in your, typical GIS parlance. So we're going to interact with feature layers and these image layers, like map image layer, web elevation layer, web imagery layer. These are raster layers. You also might encounter scene layers, and these are optimized for 3D. And then there's a lot of, you guys have all seen these base maps that are out there that you can put as the backdrop to your web map. These are tile layers. And it's just a different sort of way of thinking about them. all of these layers are linked to services, and the services say, what can I do with this data? Can I just display it? Can I display it and download it? Can I actually analyze it? So there can be constraints, and sometimes you're like, why can't I analyze this data? And it's because it is maybe just a tile layer, and it doesn't allow for you to actually analyze it. So just bear in mind, this is a review here. When we work locally in like ArcGIS Pro, we have these files where we totally can share them. We can email them to each other. We can do whatever we want with them. There's really no restrictions on them. Things like geodatabases, shapefiles, grids, local file formats. But when we move into the cloud, we're talking about layers and services. And Esri has its own kind of proprietary way of calling these things. But they're called, cloud native, and you're going to play around with some of them today. The other thing we have to talk about when we are in the cloud is sharing data. And so Esri spends some time with making this possible. Your data, your web maps, your web apps can all be made shareable with different levels of sharing. You will have options to make your data only visible or usable by you, visible and usable by your organization, or visible and usable by the public. And so this is something to pay attention to, because you might want to create a web map that isn't yet public, that you want to test, kind of test run with, say, a group. But you might want to say, I'm ready to publish this thing. Let's make it public. Okay, Sean's going to get into this. This looks gnarly. I'm going to walk through it quickly, and then you're going to see how to do this in the workshop. And I only bring this up because I love Esri software. I absolutely love it. But one thing I can't stand about it is they keep creating new tools that are parallel to old tools. So we have this data, design, develop, and we're going to go through this in the workshop. And there's lots of places to get data. We'll talk about that. Some of them are local, some of them are cloud. You get your data in, and you're going to look at it in a web map. And you can look at it in Web Map Viewer or Web Map Viewer Classic. They're two totally different ways to look at data. Very similar name, so it can be kind of confusing. Web Map Viewer is the more modern one, and it allows for some really gorgeous control of symbology. Web Map Viewer Classic is kind of rudimentary, but it allows you to do some analytical work, to actually do some analysis. So that's the first difference. You got Web Map Viewer and Web Map Viewer Classic. Sean's going to walk you through all of this. But once you've created a web map, you're going to push it to another app. And Esri has a lot of parallel options here, where they have something called Experience Builder, which is a fantastic name. They also have something called Web App Builder. And then all of your maps can also be pushed through Story Maps or Dashboard. So this slide is not meant to confuse you. It's just get it in your head that when Sean's like, and open this up in Web Map Viewer Classic, that means open it up in Web Map Viewer Classic, just because Esri does these parallel things where it has the same tool. A similarly named tool that does something different. So just, go through it. But this is the workflow we're going to go through to produce some very cool web maps. All right. Design considerations for web maps. Let's think about, when you're making these things, who are your users? Who's the audience? Who's the stakeholders? What's the objective of the map? What needs to be symbolized on the map? How is it going to be symbolized? This is an important one. What to include and what to leave out. Don't overwhelm, don't throw everything at it. And then, are there ethical considerations of the map? Where's the data from? Is this data publicly available? What are the deeper nuanced aspects of your particular data and how you want to visualize them? There's also some logistic considerations for creating web maps. Do you want to have dynamic maps or static maps? What kind of data do you need and how is it going to be hosted? Are you going to host it or are you going to be pulling from somebody else's API? Is this web map going to be embedded in an existing website? Do you need to support multiple platforms, tablets, smartphones, et cetera? And Esri does a great job of showing you what your map's going to look like on all these different platforms. Do you need to support offline access? Or are you developing a field mapping app where somebody might actually go somewhere where they don't have internet access? What are the considerations there? Do you need to collect field data? How much programming is going to be required? Everything that we're doing today is programming free, but everything we're doing today could be done in a coding environment. And then how much money are you willing to spend? So these are all things to think about in the back of your mind. I will mention we have other trainings coming up. We do have this Intro to ArcGIS Pro. If you're kind of like, ooh, I'm into it, I want to do more GIS, that would be a good one. We also have field maps and story maps. And then we've got a couple of really cool R workshops coming up as well. Everything is available on our IGIS website. All right, on to the workshops. So again, if you're having any trouble, reach out in the chat. We've got folks here who can help. And yeah, maybe not during the break, but further on. Well, if Sean needs to reach out to you, he'll reach out to you via email. Otherwise, look for emails from us following next week where we'll release the video, etc. All right, thanks so much. I'm going to turn it over to Sean.
Excellent. Thanks. That, as always, that's a fantastic intro into what we're going to get into or get our hands dirty with here in a moment. Before I get going, though, there's a couple housekeeping items that I should probably go over. And one of those is related to something we'll do at the end, is we're going to send out an evaluation to everybody. If you could please fill those out, give us comments, that would be great. We actually do look through those and try to make each of these workshops better every single time. And some of those comments have significantly adjusted how we do these workshops. One of the comments in the past has been, can we go over a little bit how to arrange our windows, or what we're displaying on our screen, because we only have so much real estate here and it gets tricky to have the instructions and the Zoom and then your ArcGIS online session all on there at the same time. And so that's something that I recommend. So I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen now so I can dive into that. And some of you, and granted, we just went through COVID, so many of us are very adept at figuring out our screens. But if this is, but again, every kind of training or session might be a little bit different, and you might have your own preferences. But this is the best that I've come up with, at least for myself, in these workshops, is to set up the directions. Which, by the way, you should have received in an email at about 11 a.m. today. If it's down toward the bottom of the email where you can download the instructions for the workshop. If you haven't done that already, if you look in your email, you can download that. And that's what you'll see over here on the left side of the screen, the workshop instructions. So I like to have that over the side. It's nice to have it there when we're working on things, because sometimes we'll have, I don't know, I'd have to scroll down a ways to find it, but there'll be names that you don't want to have to type out in your ArcGIS online search, so you can just copy and paste it into your working session. Then I tend to recommend having your ArcGIS online session somewhere off, in my case to the right, so you can we'll get into logging in here momentarily, but so you can work on that there. And then have the Zoom somewhere like off to the side. Sorry, I'm just getting over it. Had a cold last week and I got a teeny cough now. Really terrible itch. But anyway, so yeah, having that there is nice. Just a second. I'll put a cough drop in. All right. So that's one thing. Having your getting your screen set up is nice. Next, what we recommend. Man, that's a terrible cough. All right, so we'll log in a moment. Next, housekeeping item is that if you have any questions, Maggie already mentioned this, but I'll reiterate it. We have Maggie, Andy, Ben, and Robert will be here shortly. Robert Johnson, and one of them can possibly answer your questions in the chat. If not, they can moderate that and then ask or jump into the presentation as I go. I do welcome questions, of course. We have about, let's see, about 40 people here today, so we probably won't just be having you go off mute and ask, but yeah, please put your questions in there. That'd be great. Sorry, I'm going to mute for a second. Oh, all right. I just had to get that cough out. All right. So that was the next item there. Besides that, you already mentioned it's being recorded. I'll try to get that up on our ArcGIS YouTube channel on Tuesday afternoon sometime. Takes a little bit of time to render it and put it up, but then I'll send out an email to everybody also with a reminder to maybe fill out the evaluation. And something important to note is that ArcGIS does have office hours. If you go to our website, you can not just find all of our future trainings that are coming up, but we do have office hours that are welcome to anyone that's been in our trainings, and that those are excellent for follow-ups on the workshop material that we're going over. All right. So the first half for now, probably the next 15 minutes or so, I'm just going to do a show and tell. This comes from the recommendations and the exercise or evaluations in the past too, is that people like to see where some of the buttons and levers are at, so they're not lost when the directions are saying go to this button and push it, and then go. It just helps move things along. So the next 15 minutes will just be me going over the ArcGIS online interface, and you don't have to actually physically follow along with that. You can just watch. But this time period is also excellent for making sure that you're set up with your ArcGIS online. In the emails that I've sent out earlier this week, we recommend that you have an account with us through ArcGIS, just to make sure that you have all of the functionality that we're hoping to have. And I'm referring to like the analysis functions. Some licenses are limited where you won't have, say, the enrichment tools, or you won't have full access to all of Living Atlas, for example. And so we recommend that you have a license with us. To get around that, because there's always a couple people that are using their own licenses, I have adjusted the workshop exercise since the last time we did this. So you can do the whole exercise without one of our licenses, but it's better if you have one with us. And if you have any issues, again, Robert Johnson should be on here in a moment, and he can, if he's not already, and he can set you up. So just put that in the chat if you need help with your licensing.
Yeah, I'm here. So
oh, excellent.
Need any assistance with licensing, yeah, just drop me a note in the chat.
Awesome, thanks. All right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to log in. You should all have your own login set up, hopefully. This is weird. Sometimes it makes me go in. Oh, geez. I don't know why I have to type in my password twice every time I do this. It's weird. All right, typically when ArcGIS Online comes up, and I'll full screen this for you so you can see a little bit better. Typically when it comes up, it will show up in your organizational tab. I'm going to go over the tabs across the top. You'll see all these options, this conditional ribbon of horizontal options. Organization just tells you a little bit about about your data, what you're working on, in this case, the organization of your information. Sometimes for some of you, though, it'll come up in your home tab. The organizational tab, the only thing I'll point out is that there is a credit system, and that's and we'll see how that's used up shortly. The home tab, which some of you might see when it first comes up, will just be a splash page for your organization with just showing some featured items and so forth. You don't ever really work here. This is, I don't almost know what the point of this is. It just looks good. The gallery tab, though, is important because it shows everything that's available to you through your organization. And if you are a member of UCANR, or in some cases, if you're part of, say, UC Berkeley, you might have a lot of data readily available to you right here. This includes maps, layers, scenes, and we'll get into what these are. I know Maggie touched on them briefly, but we'll dive into it a little bit more. Apps. Apps might include story maps, and then other tools and notebooks. And we'll be looking at those. So there's all kinds of stuff that's here available to you. This is just one thing that's in addition to all of the data that's available through ArcGIS Online and the Living Atlas, and there's just so much data out there. For some old-time GIS folks, you will definitely appreciate this. In the past, it was really hard to find data. Now there's probably hundreds of thousands of layers that are readily available to you. And so, but then you can curate them in your organization and have them at your fingertips in this way too. If you wanted to add those, you can open it and then add them into even your ArcGIS Pro. And we'll talk about some of these peripheral apps, your Map Viewer Classic, your Map Viewer, these divergent options that we'll look at briefly. But yeah, so you can add those into your maps. Now I'm going to jump into the Map tab. This is where you're going to do the vast majority of your work. So I'll probably spend the most time orienting you to this. The Map tab is where you'll be doing your base level cartography. And why I say base level is because you will set up all your features and your layers in here, change some of your names, some of the properties of those layers, like say their pop-ups or the attribute information that can be displayed. That'll be all done in here at the base level. When you publish it up to something like a web mapping application, not to be confused with the web maps, what this is, the web mapping application, then you can add in widgets and titles and legends and you name it. All of that ends up being added on later. And again, in one of those maybe divergent ways of doing it, like with Experience Builder or the new Map Viewer or the classic one is what we'll look at today. But this is where you're going to be doing your initial work. And because I can't really show you that much before I add anything in here, I'm going to add just a basic layer that you will do in your exercise. But for now, I'll just add a layer from ArcGIS Online, just so we have an example of something that we can look at the options that are available for it. So I'm going to just look for a the USA counties layer that we'll add. I'm going to pop this up. You'll see, but if I just click on it, it brings up information about it. The metadata is the data or the information about the data, or description of both who curated the data sometimes and who is hosting it. Sometimes there's resolution information, but it's important to know what this is, but also not just for your own confidence in the data, but also to give credit where it's due if you're going to publish this, for example. So this is all in here. Once you've decided this is what you want, you can click Add to Map, and here we'll see that layer added to our map session. Again, this is just all show and tell for right now. If you have issues with your license, make sure you do ask Robert right now in the chat, and we'll have a break shortly too. Once this is up though, I can then go back to the window, this pane over on the left side, and you'll see some options. There's the About, we'll come back to that. And then there's Content. Content is going to show the layer that is that's showing here. When we add more layers, what's on top here in this kind of table of contents will be what's on top on the map. That'll make more sense when we add layers during your hands-on session. There's going to be a number of options under here, like Show Legend. There's an attribute table, which I'll click on to bring up to show you that it shows what state each of these counties are in. And if I scroll over, if my screen would let me, if I didn't have zoom on, you'd see more information over to the right, like county names and that sort of thing. So that's the that is the attribute table. Essentially what that is like an Excel sheet almost in the background, a database table that is available for information underlying each of these features. This layer here is a vector layer. And so it's not like a standard image with a raster like you have pixels, but rather each of these counties are delineated by nodes that describe the edges of the topology of each of these features. Each of those features has information attached to that attribute table that we are looking at. There's the style option that we will get into later in the exercise. It's kind of more toward the end, so we can kind of learn a little bit of computer cartography and how to make things look neat. But so that's available. There's filtering options, which we can get into later on, and how to limit what we're looking at if we only want to look at counties in, say, California. And then there is the perform analysis functions that are really neat here. And that includes joins, enriching your data, which we'll look at later, basically pulling data from one layer into another, or one background data set into a feature that you have in your project. So these analysis functions are very neat, and they're becoming more robust as time goes on. Maggie touched on that, and I'll even share a little bit more, expand on what she said a little bit more in a moment, where traditionally everything analytical was done in your desktop, and then you just publish the visualization and you're on the web, and now the analysis functionality is coming to the online sessions as well. Good. So that's about the content. There's also 3 little horizontal dots, and you're going to use a lot. This includes Zoom 2, which you will use a whole lot. That's it. So if I click on this, you'll see also Alaska pop in there. This projection in Alaska looks really big. So there's the Zoom 2. That's really useful. And then we'll look at transparency, set visibility range. We'll come back to that in the exercise. So I'm not going to dive deep into this, but a lot of this is these are very important things that you'll need to know, like remove. We'll want to clean out some of our layers at some point here, or copy or rename, you name it. So that's where you get those off those 3 dots. Moving on, you can have the legend that pops up. This is just a simple polygon layer, so there's only one real legend option. It's all the same. But if it was more complex, you'd see other legend kind of feature styles there. A little bit more. We'll go to we already went through the add data a little bit, so there's options here beside what I just showed you about how to add it from online, from ArcGIS Online. There's also, you can add it from your content, your organization, that like the data that we saw in the gallery here momentarily ago, specific groups that you belong to that are within your organization. And then you have favorites too. So say if you always want to access your county's data, that can be saved into your own hosted content. And then you could have this as a favorite where you can go jump back to it. You can change the base map that's behind your layers. So I'm going to move back a little bit here and go to the content and click this off for a second. So we have this standard kind of plain but nice background that's not too dominant, but good for reference. But you can change that, and sometimes there's like 28 of these the last time I checked. I think they add one once in a while. You can have imagery. I very much like the hybrid imagery layer. It's really nice. It's scale dependent, so you'll have more labels that will show up as you zoom in or out. And so that's typical of a lot of these base map layers. There'll be other ways that you can bring in base maps. So we'll show you one way here in the exercise as well too, beyond those 28 options. And then there's the way of getting to the analysis besides using the analysis function here. You can click on it here. Now this is something important, and a lot of GIS folks would shout this from the rooftops, is make sure that you save your work frequently. And that's really important. Just keep saving your work. When you do so, and I'm going to save as in this case, you need to give it a title, and I'm just going to say junk, probably 5 or something. I don't know how many junk layers I've had. And I'm just labeling it this because I need to dispose of this later, but I want to be able to, I want to use this as kind of for teaching right now. And I'll put junk here too, because then I can look for that tag to delete the file out of my content later. I'll just leave it go into my normal folder, and I'll save this. And I'm doing this because for a couple of reasons. One, when I save as, you need to have a tag in there. This is to make it both discoverable for yourself. So say it's 6 months from now, I need to look up where are all my junk files, because I need to clean out my my content. I can go to it that way. But also, if you publish it where it's available to everyone online, and we'll be accessing some files that are like this, if you use the right keywords, then people outside your organization or within your organization can easily find your data and use it. And you get to set those settings. So it's already saved. The next thing would be the share option. This is how you share it to either everyone, and that would include everyone in your organization, or you can set it to just certain members of certain groups. So I have all these groups that I'm a part of that that sometime is useful. Say if you're publishing your map to a collector or field maps app, and you have a certain group of people that are trained to be able to collect a certain kind of data, then this map can be shared to them so they can actually update and change it as well. So they have access to it. We'll circle back to that. But one of the big takeaways, save your stuff frequently. The rest of this stuff over here, we don't really need to dive into right now, but that's enough for the map pane option for a second. But one thing I might point out though, is you remember before there was like a horizontal conditional set of tabs across the top, and now there isn't. Now they're on a drop down on the left side. So they're just to create more real estate on the screen, I guess. But with this drop down, the next option would be scene. And this will come up in a moment. Scene is neat. I don't use it a lot, but where I showed you just a moment ago, where you share your data, you can share a scene in a similar way. I'm going to go find, let's see, there was a, I'll just use this one for now from HREC. If you were to share this scene here, you could take the URL and plug it into an iframe, which I'll show you at the end of the workshop. But once you have the scene up, you have a 3-dimensional view of an area that you might want to visualize. And here I can also have bookmarks where it'll bring me to a certain perspective for a 3D view of any kind of data feature represented in sort of a 3D sort of way, or at least 2.5D. It's like usually the data of a layer is draped over the top of an elevation model of some sort. But for now, and again, you could save this and then publish it also from here, but we're not going to get into that right now. Next is Notebook. I'm going to say leave here. Maggie mentioned, and I just mentioned too, that the ability to do analysis within the online environment is definitely improved over time and is continuing to improve. This is where you can create a new notebook. This is based on Jupyter Notebooks. It's built on top of that. This is a neat function that Esri is added in the last year, where you have your standard processing speed, which is pretty slow, but some processes don't really need a lot of like computational horsepower. But then you have more advanced CPU support, GPU support, so you can really cruise through your analysis, the bigger analysis, using credits from your account or your organization. For now, I'll just go with standard previously that was not the way it was, and this was slow, but now you have options. Once this comes in, you might recognize it as just like a kind of a typical script editor like you'd see in Jupyter notebooks. You can you copy and paste your Python code in here. You have to import your libraries and all that kind of thing, but but it does give you a lot of options for conducting analysis or automatically generating things within your maps that you want to. Say if you have a tabular data that comes in that you want to call into this and then render some kind of product that will be on your map, that's where you can do that sort of thing in here. All right. So now I'm going to get back out of that. Now you see the horizontal tabs across the top again. And what we've done, notebooks, groups. Let's touch on this really quick. We're almost done here for going into a break. So in your groups, you have groups that you might belong to. You kind of saw the list in the drop downs of the sharing options I showed you before. But here you can create a new group and invite members into it. And then anything that you share or that you're working on could be within your group, and you can all collaboratively work on it in your own way. There's a lot, you can imagine there's a lot of scenarios where you have data that's especially in early versions of that data that you don't need to share with everybody. You just want to share it with certain people. And so setting up a group is the way to do that. Content, this is another place that you'll spend a fair bit of time, probably second to your map tab. And here you'll see everything that you've done. And this includes junk, other just random things. You'll have, these are just either web maps, web mapping applications, hosted feature layers, story maps. I got a CSV table that I threw in here a little while back. You name it. There's all kinds of content that you have here. You can star some of these, and if you do that and you go to your favorites, that will show up there. So again, what I mentioned earlier, where you can add things to your favorites and then they're easily accessible in the future. You have all your file folder options over here on the left side that are there to keep your data organized. I have a training folder here I throw stuff in to. I'm starting to get the feeling that I really need to do some house cleaning and get rid of a ton of stuff here, because I have way too much content on here that's not really needed. I'll have to do that search for junk, and it's going to give me a whole bunch of layers. All of this needs to go right here. So that's where that that tag option was important. You can also create apps, and you can create new items here too. So if you wanted to create a new featured layer from scratch, this is where you would do it. Moving on, there's your favorites. I already talked about that. Your groups, a different way to see your groups. Your organization, this is kind of a redundant way of looking at your organizational data. And then living atlas is interesting, and we'll look at that kind of data. There's redundant ways to get to that data. And here, speaking of that, and last thing I want to show you before we take a break is up here, there's this little cluster of dots on the top right-hand corner. One thing that's neat about ArcGIS Online is it functions as sort of a hub for all of these peripheral or satellite type apps. So you have your field maps, map viewer, story maps, experience builder, you name it. The list, you can see there's quite a few of them. And most of all of these all tie in or integrate with ArcGIS Online to one level or another. Or they redundantly are ArcGIS Online. And I'm gonna actually click on that because I want to have a spare tab of the ArcGIS Online, because sometimes you end up wanting to look at your content and at your map at a similar time. So you'll be working on a web mapping application, and you want to jump back to your web map, and you have another window that you can do that in. Back to this cluster though. So you have these. There's a bunch of these. The one we have field maps coming up pretty soon for a workshop. That's a combo of a bunch of different apps. It's neat. We have story maps coming up. Each of these are essentially their own training, or they're like their own kind of bunch of domain of knowledge that are related to them that we won't dive into so much today, but I just want you to know that these are all here. All right, with that, I'm thinking that we should jump into a break. And while you're on break, if you can, we'll take a 10-minute break, but while you're on break, if you feel so inclined, make sure to get your ArcGIS Online up and running, log in, and go to the map tab once you're on. This is where we're going to be working. It's going to bring up the last map that I was working on. Oh, no, it didn't. That's good. So I'm going to go to details and about, and there's a little basic tutorial here that is available to you. So you can choose, pan to an area, decide what you want to show, draw. So there's a little bit of information in a tutorial under the about, under details in your map. If you want to play with that, go for it. And otherwise, let's reconvene at 2:10. And if you have any questions, yeah, just go ahead and throw them out there right now. If you need any help with your setup, put them in the chat. Robert can help you, and yeah, give you a little bit of time to decompress or explore, or you name it. All right, so let's get going again. So there's a lot of stuff to cover. We tend to like to try to put in about 10 gallons of information into about a 5-gallon bucket of time. And so I want to make sure that we get to go through all of this, which leads me to some things that I'd like to point out when you go through the exercise. People have different strategies or preferences of how they like to do this. Sometimes they like to just listen and watch the presentation, or they like to listen and watch and then follow along by where I'm leading things. Sometimes people like to go through the exercise on their own, step by step, following the directions, and do everything that way, and then just have my voice in the background. I typically follow the exercise for the most part. Most of this is, I'll do it from memory. So I will skip over something, sometimes for just time constraints. I prefer to that, again, because there's a lot of things to talk about and not the ton of time to talk about it. And so I'll skip over some things that are not really critical. I've also put in the exercise some kind of hints, like this is optional, like optional notes. You don't really have to do this if you don't want to at all, but it's there for you in case you do want to know about some, say, different data sets or different analysis steps. So that's available. There's information only cues to say, okay, this is not a step that you have to do, but there is peripheral information about or around what we're working on that might make the steps clearer to you. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't leave that out of there. Sometimes when I'm presenting, I'll include more information that's just that is important to me. And when I say that, it's like I always try to frame these exercises like, what do I want to convey that I wish I knew when I first started doing this? And so I'll try to cue in on things like that. So that's some of that's written in here. Some of it I'll just I'll talk about as we go through the exercise. So if everybody's back and ready to go, there's one other thing. Now that we did our 10-minute break, I like to try to do like 5-minute breaks every so often to make sure everybody kind of gets a chance to rest and not feel like they're driving in the fog too long, going through all of the material on this lovely Friday afternoon. So we'll get through everything that way. So hopefully everybody is logged into their ArcGIS Online now, and we'll start working on the exercise, hands-on steps. Once you get into ArcGIS Online, I'd like you to go, if this is what it looks like when it first comes up, go to your map tab to start with at the top. If maybe you were experimenting around and you already created a map here and added some content, you'll need to go up to the top right-hand corner and create a new map. Just so this way we're starting fresh.
Can you
Um,
repeat that again? Because I didn't see which right-hand corner you went to.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. So yeah, please.
Because I was in another map and
Okay. No, I get it. That's why I mentioned it. Sometimes I've cruised past that and then people are stuck and if you're stuck, let us know. So the up in the top right-hand corner of your map window, there'll be an option, a drop-down option for new map. You'll click
thank you.
that and then click create new map. And that'll bring up a fresh new map for you with all blank. By the way, if you are working on a map and that map's important to you, you want to make sure you save it before you do that, or you'll lose your whatever you are working on. All right. So let's start off by adding data. That's kind of the key thing that's important for getting a map going. So we'll go up to the top on the left-hand side where there's the drop down under add data, and we will go to search for layers. If by default, it'll go to my content, but because I noticed from the beginning that like most everybody here is a 1 on a scale of 1 to 5 on getting used to their knowing about ArcGIS Online, you might not have any content here whatsoever yet. So we're not going to be using this. Instead, we'll do the drop down and go down to ArcGIS Online. And we'll have all kinds of various types of data that are available to us here. And like I did before, let's just type in USA counties. And it gives me the prompt because I just typed it in the session before. Give you a second to do that. So that's under the search option here, under the ArcGIS Online, under the add data. And sometimes I'll cruise through things slow like this. Sometimes I'll do it and then I'll repeat myself to make sure that that I'm not leaving anybody behind. So once you see the USA counties pop up here, I'm going to click on that to have the information about the layer come up. You can see this a feature layer hosted by Esri, and it has a description of the counties of the 50 states, just a little bit of information. And then down at the bottom here, you'll see add to map, and you can click on that. Now for navigating around your windows, we'll close this with the little X at the top. So you see the Esri sign if you're down at the bottom, like up here at the top right-hand side of the pane, click the X and it'll back out. And then over to the left, there's a little back arrow, and we'll click on that as well to get backed out. Now we're still seeing the about information that really isn't that important to us right now, but what is important is what do we have in our content? And so we click on content now, and you'll see the USA counties has now showed up in our map, not just in the viewer, but also in the screen center, but also over here in the content. And under that, you have some options. Because from experience, I know I can just kind of go on and talk about this stuff. What I would recommend you do right now, just for a couple minutes, go ahead and look at each one of these. Just take a peek at what these options are underneath the USA counties, like the attribute table, the style, the analysis. Just look at that. You don't need to make any changes right now, but just peruse what's available to you right there. You can look at the options a little bit, see the style, that sort of thing, and then practice backing out. Just get used to navigating around these options, and that includes the 3 horizontal drop-down options. Good. Just play with that for a moment, and then we'll continue. Might note in the directions, there's some other layers that you might be interested in bringing in, but we won't bring those in right now. We don't need to clutter up the map unnecessarily. Good. Now that you've had a chance to play with those a little bit, couple things I mentioned before. So there's the zoom to, there's the transparency, and the set visibility range. We're going to be coming back to the set visibility range soon, but just as kind of a preface to that, we have this little triangle here at the top that shows how far out you're zoomed. See, if I zoom in, you'll see that triangle move. The grayed area on the slider bar is what you can see. So if I zoom out to a certain level, you can see the whole, all the counties. If I were to move this triangle over, it'll disappear. This is important because one of the layers we'll bring in here shortly comes in as a default a visibility range that's doesn't really make sense for the map that we might want to make. So we'll have to play with that a little bit, but I just wanted to note that here right now. Good. So the next thing is, let's add some more data. Now that we have the US counties in there, let's go on and add some fire data, because that's going to be kind of a theme of the data content we're going to be working with today, is the Caldor fire from a couple of years ago. I'll tell you a little very super brief story about that in a bit. So right now we're going to go to search for layers again. ArcGIS Online is fine, but what we'll do is we'll put in Caldor fire as our search option. So just again, go up to your add data. On the drop down, make sure you have ArcGIS Online selected, and then in the search you type in Caldor fire. And once that's there, you click enter, and you see some various options. The first of those is the DINS layer, and that's the damage inspection layer that's created by Cal Fire. Actually, know someone that does these inspections. I was just talking to him 2 days ago. But yeah, anyways, there's so this is the inspection data that Cal Fire collects, and what we're going to do, we can look down and see a little bit more information about it, but we can just click add to map for now, and you'll see that it'll automatically zoom you to that layer. And right now the county data layer in the background is a little bit, I don't know, a little more than I might want. So I'm going to do is I'm going to X out of this description area, click the back button here, and I'm going to turn off the USA counties. So now you can see it overlaid on top of that more intuitive background layer. We'll use the USA counties layer, or at least refer to it in a little bit. Now we can see.
How did you turn off the county? Sorry about that.
Oh, you uncheck the box on the USA counties.
Thank you. It just shows you how amateur I am. I'm just learning. Sorry.
No worries. No worries. It's okay. No, there's definitely, we're not born with this knowledge of how to run these apps here. So there's no fault in questions. But yeah, so the USA, I just turned it off so we can view this a little bit better. And so if we look at that and we look at the legend for it, you can see the red areas are completely destroyed, major damage, minor, affected, inaccessible. So there's a bunch of options that are available here in this for this map. We'll come back to that. I'll close up the legend. But now but with just one feature layer, we're not really, what are we going to compare it to? That's kind of one of the key points of a map, is to have some feature that you compare to something else, typically at least. You can have it for a reference, but oftentimes you want to have it in relative to something else. So we're going to add a little bit more data. And if we we search for under Caldor fire again in a moment, we're going to add in some burn severity data. So we'll I'll go back to the map, go to add data, search for layers. Caldor fire by default is already up for me, so I'm going to just leave that in there. And the second option now is the Caldor burn severity layer. By the way, these usually typically they are put in order by how popular they are, and they're sometimes popular for a good reason. In this case, yeah, the burn severity collected by the NRCS or Natural Resource Conservation Service of the USGS is yeah, a very robust organization. So I'm going to click on this now. You're not going to see any image for it, but there is a layer that is behind here. So I'm going to click add to map. It's going to take a moment for this to render. I'm going to X out of this extra pane and go back a little bit. So I mentioned before, the little preface, that if you zoom out, some layers are not set up for that by default. So if I zoom out on this, you'll see that it disappears, and because it's not set up to be displayed, it is scaled. It spans the same area as the damage index or the damage inspection layer. So, and you'll see it gets grayed out over here in the contents too. Once that Caldor fire layer, this burn severity layers in. The way that you get around that is you click on these three horizontal dots, go down to set visibility range, and you will see that the little dark triangle is outside of the grade slider. So what I want to do is just grab that slider and move it all the way over to the side. And now you see where the burn severity layer comes in and what it looks like. So you got, yeah. So now you have a better perspective of it. But you notice something kind of that's here, it's not quite right, is that this bigger layer is covering up the features, the houses, the damage layers. So I mentioned before, the order that they're drawn on the map here is the same order from top to bottom that they're drawn in the contents over here. So what I might have to do is grab the DINS layer and put it on top. And then you can see those features pop out a lot better. Good. All right, so now we're starting to get something that looks good. So you can see where the burn severity coincides really closely with the burned area in Grizzly Flats. It's this cluster of houses that were burned up. That's, yeah, an intense burn severity area, of course, where the houses were burned the most. So yeah. So let's see, let's get on another layer though. So there's a little bit information we already talked about the legend and so forth. Like I go through some of this a little out of order of the directions here, but info only, already talked about this. Okay, so we're going to add some more layers. So something to note there, you can add shape files. We'll do that shortly. And CSV file will also add that. GPX, that's a formerly proprietary Garmin format that now is used for phones and all kinds of things. And then GeoJSON is another common portable layer option. Let's do this though. If we scroll down to the bottom of page 16 or close to the bottom, I am going to select this wildfire risk to communities layer, Control C to copy that. And I'm going to add this from the Living Atlas. You can see on here that I'm looking in the Living Atlas now. And this is to show just how you can bring in data from Living Atlas as well as ArcGIS Online. We actually won't be producing this or having this map feature or layer in our final result unless you want to, because I'm going to give you a little time to play around with it. But for now, I'm going to go into Add Data and select Browse Living Atlas. So in the map pane again, go to Add Data, Browse Living Atlas, and then I'm going to paste that wildfire risk to communities, click Enter, and the first thing that pops up is wildfire risk to communities wildfire hazard potential. So I already know what this layer is, and you can pretend that you do too now for now. Because if you do, you don't have to click it and then go down to the bottom and add to map. Instead, you can just push this little plus sign at the bottom and click add, and it'll pop up. And this will take a minute because it's a pretty big layer. So the interesting thing about this, and you can kind of see that it coincides with the, like if the colors are intuitive at least, it coincides more or less where the burn severity happened. So the area that was the highest potential along this, along this red area across here, I'm going to go back to my content and toggle on and off the burn severity here. You can see it more or less coincides with what actually happened in real life. This is interesting to me, at least, because if you were going to kind of validate, say, a model that came up with the wildfire potential or hazard, and then compared it to the results, there you have it. You can see that, yeah, that the model worked to a certainly decent degree. I know, granted, there's might be coarse scale of the model might not exactly be matching the scale of the result or the actual occurrence, but it's still it's interesting. So for now, I will turn off this wildfire risk potential layer just because we don't need it at the moment. And we can add in some other neat fire kind of data. I'll skip this layer right here. Well, actually, no, let's not skip that. Let's search for wildfire risk. We have time. I see we're definitely on track. Control C. So now at bottom of page 16, optional search for wildfire risk. I'm going also in Living Atlas. So I'll add data, search Living Atlas. Click on, I'm going to paste in wildfire risk, or you can type that in there under the search option and click enter. So wildfire risk. You'll see the first one that pops up is the USA current wildfires. And so let's add that in there and see what it looks like. Last time I did this workshop, it was in March and there was no fires to look at, but we can see the mosquito fire polygon now is available. So Esri is really, they definitely do a good job of curating and putting together fire data that's available to the public. And so you can get kind of this sort of data pretty readily. The only issue though is that the data they get, it takes a day or two for them to curate it. And so if you're right along the fire line, it's not quite real time enough for what you need. And I will come back to that a little bit here. So anyway, so we can have that that wildfire risk, and you can see, you can click on this and you'll see information about how much is burned and all that kind of thing. This is, again, a layer hosted by Esri, so we don't have real control over this content. It's they control the content that's that they are hosting. You get to control the content that you host. That's kind of a it's a subtle distinction that you don't really appreciate until you're trying to do some kind of analysis or something like that. And if like Maggie talked about the services, if their service is not set up for you to be able to do that, then you just can't do it. You have to have your own control to be able to know what the level of service is for that any given layer. So right now I'm going to actually just remove that. I don't need it on here. So go ahead to the US current wildfires, click on the 3 horizontal dots and go down and click remove and click yes, remove layer. What the heck, where'd it go? Oh, this is the perimeter layer. It's the second one that also came in with it. So we can get rid of that as well. So the second USA current wildfires perimeter data, and I'm going to click remove on that as well. This is another neat option, is air quality. This is kind of big. If you have kind of like asthma or bad allergies like I do, And so I'm going to add that in there as well. So I'll go to Living Atlas. And this stuff is all optional, by the way. If anyone's getting behind on this, you don't feel like copying and pasting so much or typing so much. Oops, air quality. Don't worry about it. There's this is not critical stuff. This is under the optional highlighted areas. But if I put in the air now quality data, this is interesting because it'll show the parts per, I don't know, it's parts per million or parts per thousand, I don't, or 100,000. I don't remember what the scale was, but when you hear this kind of stuff reported on the news, this is the layer that is, these are stations that record this information that for air quality. When the Caldor fire was going, Tahoe was about 980 and Placerville was about 1250. You couldn't see like a block through the smoke. It was so bad. So this is just interesting to have this. Here's an interest. I bring this layer in though for a reason, not unlike the current wildfire layer, but more actively updated. This layer is a dynamic layer that is updated, I believe, every half hour, but at least every hour with from a database that's streaming in to update these numbers. If for any reason you needed to do a study of this data and you needed to capture these values at a given point in time, there's workarounds to do that. And one of those workarounds, and we'll come back to this a little bit in a little bit, so I won't go through the whole steps right now, is to do so you can do some analysis with this. So you click analysis, feature analysis, and you could join this feature with another feature like your counties layer. And what it does is that then it captures the moment of what this data is displaying now, and then it puts it in your own hosted content. So you capture that data and you have that information stored at the time that you want it. So again, that's, say if you're doing a study in 2 years from now, this is going to be different information than what was pertinent at the time of the fire. So you might want, that's how you can capture that.
Sean, where was the thing that you said, the analysis? Which of those little things was that?
That is the little the perform analysis, the square box here. There's also analysis up at the top. You can get to it 2 different ways.
Okay, thank you.
That's just to show you. I mean, again, you didn't have to do that. It's just that there's a little bit of info only. So it's important. For now, let's go ahead and remove the air quality layer. So that's the 3 horizontal drop down, 2/3 of the way down the options, and then click remove, and yes, remove layer, because we don't really need that in there for what we'll be doing. Good. Let's do just another, just one more step, and we'll take a break. So in the exercise down on page 17, you'll see exercise adding tabular data. And so we have this URL here that you can copy and paste, or in my case, because it's in Google Drive, I can just click on it. But for now, I'll Control C and I'll add it up into my browser and enter it. So you can go ahead and do the same thing. We'll go to that tabular data download, click on it, and you'll see it comes up in Google Drive as a downloadable sheet. And I've already done this, so I'm not going to click down, but normally you would click download at the top. But this layer came in, and I'll look in my downloads and we'll see this. This is the ANR locations layer. ANR, or Agriculture and Natural Resources of the University of California, many of you will already know, is the organization that ArcGIS is under. We have a number of statewide programs like ArcGIS, but we also have 9 research and extension centers around the state and county offices for resources to the communities for all 58 counties in California. And so this layer includes the addresses for all of these locations. I'm going to just double click on this to bring it up so you can see what it looks like in Excel. And what you'll see is a field ID number, the location or the counties that are served, and then the address of this layer. You can use this address kind of like you would use in like a search function in Google to find the specific locations that of these building or these offices, in a lot of cases, the research centers. You could also have a latitude and longitude. And when this is uploaded into ArcGIS Online, we'll see in a second, it knows how to interpret this information. So I'm going to just close that for right now. It's still in my downloads. Don't save. As long as it's in a CSV or a text file format, it's usable. So let's load that into our ArcGIS Online. So you go ahead and click on this if you haven't already, or bring it up, download it. And so it should go into your downloads. Then we'll go over to our map pane again, go to add data, and we'll select add layer from file. We'll click on this and you'll see these options again: shapefile, CSV, text. This is a CSV that we want right now, GPX and GeoJSON. We'll choose file. It already knows to go to my downloads folder because that's the last place I was at. You might have to navigate for yourself to your downloads right now. Give me a second to do that. So go to your downloads and then go to the ANR locations file. Click on that and then open. And once you've done that, so choose file, search to downloads, get the ANR locations, and then import layer. By default, it'll usually recognize what lines up. So the FID is not important, location is not important, but the address or place is important. And it recognizes that's the field that it's going to use for geopositioning or geocoding is the specific term for it. These locations, and then I'll click add layer. So you'll see them all pop up all around the state. Good. When we get back after a 5-minute break, we'll dive into doing some basic analysis using this data that we just added in here. But before we do that, this is really important. Actually, this is really important anytime you consider doing analysis or shifting from screen to screen, is save your project. So everybody go to save. The first time you do it, it'll just, when you click save, it'll bring up this prompt. You'll put in a title. I'm going to say AGOL training map. Actually, yeah, map. Cartographers hate it when you put map in the title of a map, but I'll just do it anyways for now. And then I'll just say junk in my case. You can put training, you can put whatever tag you need. And once you get the tag in there, you might have to click enter to add it in there. And as long as you have one tag, it's okay, but you need to have a tag for your map. And then save your map. Good. Let's see, it's 2:42. Let's reconvene at 2:47. And if anybody has any questions, I'm going to look at the chat right now.
My question was, is it saving the map as a this is my I don't even know what to ask this question as. Imagine I would like to download this with geocodes, whatever, to do something else. It's just saved as a sorry.
So you saved it. So I get what you're saying. So we just did there is we saved the map. So it's only in ArcGIS Online. The content of this map and the map itself can be pulled into your ArcGIS Pro session if you sync your ArcGIS Pro with your ArcGIS Online account. That's kind of like a step in another workshop we go over. But yeah, if you do the ArcGIS Pro workshop,
I'll be there.
Yeah, that we
Thank you.
we go through that there. Good question. All right, so so 2:47, maybe 2:48. Let's call it 2:48. We'll get back going. So I'm going to get up and walk around a little bit myself. All right. Yes, we can get going here, and just to ease into it, I'll address Saloni's question about the importance of addresses versus coordinates, or what the trade-off is. And really, it just depends on what you have, because it's a lot easier to sometimes find an address for a building or a location than it is to get the coordinates readily. I mean, you can go to Google Maps and look up either one really, but you can just, if you just have the addresses, say from I don't know, it's a survey sheet, for example, from that someone entered their information, their addresses in, they might know their address, but they don't know their coordinates. Either way, it plots it or geocodes it on the map all the same. It's just, as long as the address is within some form of database, it works. As long as the coordinates come in typically in the right latitude and longitude sort of format, and it's and really there's, for the purposes of mapping, the latitude and longitude of different coordinate systems is not that far off, so it's sufficient for this kind of mapping. But hopefully that answers the question. There's not really an important reason why you use one or the other than what's available to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there's and someone kind of answered that too. Good. All right, so I'm off the chat now. Close this out. All right, so next we're going to jump into some transformations and analysis. And this is fun, I think. And so the first thing we'll do is we're going to do a little bit of, we're going to look at the attributes table and do some filtering with the DINS public view, or the damage inspection data. And so what we'll do is we'll go to our content. So again, at the top, if you're not already there, get to your content in your underneath details. And we'll go down to the DINS layer. And there's a little table there, and we'll click on that. Shift my screen so I can see it and get my zoom windows out of the way so I can also see it. So you'll see, like, there's no damage, the structure type, those are really the two important things to know. And then there's different levels of damage as you go down these two columns. There's a lot of features there. I'm going to zoom to this layer, by the way, right now. So I'm going to go over it, click on the three horizontal dots. First option is zoom to. I'll click on that, and then we'll jump right down to those features. It'll take a little moment for the background to render as well. So once we are here, we will, what we're going to do is do a little bit of filtering. And so what we'll do is click on this little like funnel looking option underneath the Caldor app. And by the way, some people's applications, if you don't see this, I have to hover over it. I've heard people say that they have to click on it to get these options to show up sometimes. So click filter. And we have a lot of features here. And if the buildings are not destroyed, we might not be interested in them. If they're completely destroyed, we might not be interested in them. Maybe we're looking at people that we can help. And I'm kind of saying this from like a theme of what, like say an A&R office, which we brought in some A&R office data. And those offices have resources like our FNEPs, and there's forest advisors in some of these locations. There's all kind. I mean, there's CalFresh is in a lot of these offices. So there's resources to the communities there. We might want to reach out to people that need our help, and those people could be the ones that have damage to their houses, but their houses aren't entirely destroyed, meaning that they're not there anymore. So what we might look for is damage is affected, like 1 to 9%. You could also do minor, but let's just, for now, for the sake of the exercise, click on affected. And we're not going to look at like barns or whatever. We want to look at single family residences. So what we'll do is we'll add another expression. And in that one, we'll click on not damage, but structure type. And single family residence is the default. So we'll just stick with that. And then we'll apply filter. And so what you'll see, I mean, it's kind of muted maybe in your display here, but only now the green options, the affected layer is what is available, or is all that you can see. There's also an option called enrichment or data enrichment that we can just play with that right now. We're not going to actually run this option, but I want to show it to you because it is fun and interesting. So in the content, I'm going to click on this and reduce the player, but I'm going to look at enriching this layer. But I bring this up for a reason. Once you've run a filter and you conduct any kind of analysis on it thereafter, the analysis will only be done on the features that are displayed. So there's still all this tabular data in the background. If I click on table, there's it's only showing what's the filter stuff, but there's a lot more features in this layer if I remove the filter. The way I could do is remove the filter, and don't do this, but I could click on there and click remove filter. I'm not going to do that right now, but just so you know, that's the option. But if I run an analysis, that includes data enrichment, only done on these features. And let's do that. We'll actually won't run all the way through it, but I want to go through the steps. So what we'll do is we'll click on the little square box where it says perform analysis, and then click on feature analysis. I don't know if you see that. It might be the raster analysis might just only be on my display as an extra add-on. So feature analysis, and then data enrichment is the third one down, and click enrich layer. It'll take a second for it to get in there. So you see the DINS public view, and then you select the variables that you might be interested in. And again, we're not going to really go through this. We're not going to go through the full steps, but there's a lot of cases where you might be interested in the age, the income, the household dynamic, or the characteristics. You name it. There's the poverty. If you go further on, there's tapestry at risk, key facts. There used to be a landscape, which I liked for this scenario, but they don't have it anymore. But for now, I'll just click on at risk. And what the heck? Oh, show at-risk variables. What the heck? There's no stop displaying. I just did this earlier today and it worked just fine. So bizarre.
I think I got it.
Yeah, some of you might see it when I did it. I do know how to. Here, I'm going to cancel it. Here, if that happens to you, cancel, save. Back.
Where did you cancel?
I just X'd out of it.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm going to go all the way back to where I was at before. I'll go in here, click analysis. I will go features, enrich, enrich. Wait until the variables show up. Click on this. Over, at risk. Now it shows up. Yeah, okay. I don't know why. Sometimes if you save it, you back out and then come back in, it'll show up.
Hey, Sean, go back and see if the land use stuff is under tapestry. So just go back here. Back.
Oh, yeah, it is not. I did look.
Oh,
earlier.
yeah?
Yeah, I looked this earlier.
Okay.
I mentioned earlier there was some kind of broken links. This is one of the ones that was kind of almost in that category.
Yeah, tapestry is like Esri's in-house demographics.
Oh, right.
Stuff.
That's
Yeah.
right. Okay. Well, where's the land cover?
It's gone.
Stuff?
It just disappeared in the last couple months.
Oh, that's a real bummer, man. I like that a lot.
There was tons of available data there too. So bummer. Anyways. So now we have this option so we can, oh wait, I'll back up. Hopefully at risk is still there. Yes. So we can click in say poverty index. So that's like a scale of how impoverished these areas might be. And then I could apply this. And if I did want to run this, this option, and it's not a very big, heavy computational thing, but it still take a couple minutes, so we'll skip it. We don't need this for the workshop really, other than for understanding how this works, especially now that we can't get land cover data around these points. But you'll give it a name, but here's a key thing that's important, is to show credits. Each analysis step requires credit. So if I click on show credits, this is a very light process. There's only 10 features or so. And so that's like 0.1 credits required. That's nothing. Some processing steps I've seen take 100 credits. We one time had one of our advisors do a bunch of geocoding, use up like 400,000 credits. But you just knowing that each kind of these functions can use credits is important. So if you're not sure, another thing that's important to know too is use current extent. If you're doing an analysis and you don't want it to go outside of the extent of your screen, which you usually don't, sometimes you do, you want to make sure that that box is checked. Those are the key things right now for this. So I'm going to so instead of running analysis, I will back out of this. So I'll go up to the top and click the back button, the close button. And then
if you had hit run analysis, what would it have done? Just done the map with all of the things you just selected?
It will absorb
analysis?
It would absorb the values of poverty or at-risk index, the income index, into these features, and then that layer would reside then in your content. So effectively, you see this attribute table across the bottom. It would add another column that would have the at-risk index included on it. So another column for each of these features.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So in data speak, it would be like a merge, or
yes, it is a merge, and like a join. And in fact, the join is almost identical to it, and it's following this where you could join features to your U.S. counties. We're going to entirely skip this. I just include this information in there because this is a super useful workaround for being able to get other people's data that the service of that data does not allow you to do full analysis on the features that you want. And so you can using join or enrichment, some other analysis steps, you can bring those in and then create those and include those in your data. But let's do one though, the proximity to the ANR offices. And so that what we'll do then, and actually I'm going to do something out of order a little bit right here, so that you can see this dot right over here. If I click on it, it'll be more apparent. You might not even be able to see it on your screen, but this is the Placerville Cooperative Extension Office. Has resources for this community, and so we want to be able to make that be more important than a dot you can barely see. So let's kind of skip ahead to a little bit of visualization. And what I'm going to do here is go to this style option, change style, the triangle, the square, the circle underneath the ANR locations feature, and click on that. And then I'm going to go to location and click options. So you can see the symbol here is what we have, and the visibility range is fine, the transparency is fine, but I need to click on the symbol and it gives me some more options. When you're working on a map, you want to have the things that are most important really pop out. So we're going to make this pop. And the way we can do that, we could change the size and the shape, these things under shape, but let's do something else. Let's go down and select general infrastructure. But before you do that, just note you can also put in custom images, and there's a plethora of other options that are in here too. But just for now, we'll select general infrastructure, scroll down to something that looks like a house, maybe. 8 is way too small, so I'm going to make it like 30. So we under shape. So just to back up, I clicked on the symbol here. This pops up. Under shape, I selected general infrastructure. and then I clicked this building and I added it, made it to 30, and now I'm clicking OK. So now you see it looks important on the map. It's not just a kind of a little nothing. And we can click OK and then done. If you don't click OK and then done and you move out of it, it'll disappear. That what you've done will be gone and you'll have to go back and do it again. So there we have the ANR Cooperative Extension Office, but we want to do a little analysis for proximity to show routes and to show how it's available to these locations that might need the services there. So what we'll do is go into the analysis, use proximity, and find nearest. So at the ANR locations, we'll click on the square box, feature analysis, find locations, and oh no, use proximity. I'm sorry, not find location. My bad. Use proximity. I got too ahead of myself. So down here and find nearest. So again, I'll back up because I actually just did this earlier and I got it out of order in my mind. Anyhow, so once we're in here in the analysis, we'll go down to use proximity, find nearest. It'll automatically recognize the ANR locations. It'll automatically recognize the Caldor damage index layer. Those are the 2 point features that would be relevant. Get measurement of line distance, but line distance really doesn't make sense. What we really want is driving time or driving distance. So let's just select driving distance for now. And then you could add in barriers. You could add in barriers if you selected a polygon layer. Say if, for example, the services are only available on a county level, and so you wanted to use the county layer as a barrier to make sure you're just within El Dorado County. That could be done with the barriers. Limit the number of locations to just 1. So we always want 1-to-1. So we don't have like this trying to reach out and find another county office in another county at a further distance. So just 1 is the closest driving distance. Limit to 100 miles is fine. Result layer, you would change this name as you prefer. Key thing you don't have to do is include route layers. And then the location, you could do show credits. This is not going to be much. It's just 1 credit, no big deal. And then don't do this. Don't click run analysis. What you'd want to make sure you do is square this up so it's just the office and the fire burned area that's important to you in your screen. I might shift this a little bit so it's just the Placerville office and the fire burned area. You'd have use your map extent to constrain the processing. Don't run analysis because instead that takes 3 minutes. I timed it earlier. Better yet, let's just go down and you can use the layer that I created some time ago. This is the nearest ANR facility to threatened structures layer. So if you go down into your exercise, page 20, halfway down under number 7, there's the nearest ANR facility to threatened structures. You can control C or copy and paste. Copy that. Go over to add data and then add data, search for layers. ArcGIS Online. I have your quality still in there, so I'll X out of that. Instead, I'll control V or paste in the nearest ANR facility to threatened structures layer that I created and click enter. And it's the first thing that pops up. So now all we have to do is we can skip again. We don't have to look at the data, the metadata on this. We can just do the plus sign and add it in. So just so y'all know, just as a repeat, in case anybody missed that, on page 20, there's the nearest ANR facility to threatened structures layer that's referred to. You can copy and paste that into your add data, ArcGIS Online, add your nearest, then add this layer in there. You might notice that we're getting this from ArcGIS Online. That's because when I publish this layer, I publish it to everybody is what will and we'll do that shortly when we share our data to see how that is done. But for now, just know that it was this is layers published to everybody. Then ArcGIS Online recognizes it and makes it discoverable for everybody, and then other people can access it, including you, through this means of locating the file. So once that's in there, we'll just add that with the plus sign. You'll see this purple line pop up and route itself to the ANR office. This is exactly what you would see if you would have run the analysis on the proximity nearest features function. Again, it just to take you less time. In some people's processing options I mentioned earlier, they then all the analysis functionality is not available on everybody's license. So this is how I worked around that so no one got stuck. So here we got the routes, the road routes, just like you'd see on Google Maps, for example. If I go back now, up here, top left, back to my contents, you'll see two options in here. There's one, if I toggle it on and off, is a little dot. That's the ANR office because it recreated it anew. And then there's the route. We don't need the dot. We already have that neat building there. So we can just go down and remove this. So they're the three dots and remove. So one of the, I say this sometimes, is half the battle of making your map nice is to be selective about what layers are in your map and then keep everything organized. And so, and make sure things are in the order that they need to be, like the ANR location might need to be at the top. Oh, I'm gonna get and drag it up. So that pops out a little bit more. The damage layer should be maybe up above the other layer. And so then it starts to look a little bit better. And it stays organized. Good. Moving on. Okay, we're going to add in some fire perimeter data, and I'm going to do just a little bit of changing the style, and then we'll take another break, another brief break. So the exercise data so there's a fire perimeter data that's available. This is a really neat resource, is the FTP site of CAL FIRE that has all kinds of incident data for fires with like daily records of perimeters and GIS that's available. And in this case, we're just going to be using one of the last dates of the Caldor fire. So if you could go to page 20 under number 1 and copy this URL, this address, and we will go up to you can either add another tab in your browser and paste that in there and go to it. And this is what you should see, something like this. Just so you know, this is buried within a directory. If you go up a lever, so it's in incident data and it's in the GIS. I mention this because there's also IR data that's coarser than the GIS. It's layers of data that was collected by either CAL FIRE or their sometimes private contractors, the USGS NEAROPS airplanes. So there's like a bunch of that data that's more fresh than the cleaned up GIS data. And so that I used that when I was making a map a while back that turned out to be really popular. So then parent directory above that, you can see all these different fires that are available. I'm going to go back now to where we were at. So I'll go into Caldor, go into GIS, go into incident data, and this is where we were at to start with. I'm going to go down to the second from the bottom option. So we're looking at basically the end of the fire, what happened by the very final part. And I'm going to click on that. And you'll see here, is there's a Caldor Prim zip file, the second one that you see. And what you could do is you could download it. I'm not going to click on it and download it myself because I've already done it today and it's already in my downloads. It looks like this when it comes in, same name and so forth. What I'll do is I'll unzip it though, just so you can see what it looks like. You don't need to do this. I'm going to extract here. And so what you see down here is this is an older file, so it says a long time ago in mine, but you'll see that it's actually a shape file. And a shape file tends to be 4 to 9 different like associated peripheral files. There's the actual shape file, but then there's database file, projection file, you name it, index file. So there's all these different options. Well, those all need to be zipped together before they can go into ArcGIS Online. So actually, when you download it from this site, it's ideal for efficiency's sake, just to pull this layer right into your ArcGIS Online session. This perimeter data from 9/15 of 2021. So the way we do that, so once you've downloaded it, so if you go to that site, download that layer, go back to your ArcGIS Online session, go to Add Data, Add Layer from File. So Add Data, Add Layer from File. You can see that Shape File, it notes that you need to have a zipped archive containing all shaped files, so all associated files is what we just saw. And we'll browse, choose file. This is it right here. You might have to, hopefully your file browser automatically will bring you back to your downloads, but if not, you might have to go to your downloads. But once you do, click on the file that you just downloaded and click open. Once you get that, click import layer and you'll see it come in. So there's the way it comes in as a default, it's it'll automatically prompt you to be able to adjust the style when it comes in as a shape file like this. There's pluses and minuses to the way that it defaults out, but that's fine. You can adjust it as you need it to either highlight or subtract from things on your map. In this case, we want to highlight the perimeter because this is a perimeter layer. We want to see just the perimeter. We have the burn severity within the center. And by the way, if we would have went through this directory here, we could have picked out a number of different dates so we could look at the progression of the fire if we wanted as well. Just know though, there's a certain number of layers you're allowed to have in your map. As I found out, if you put too many perimeters in there, like every single date, it'll eventually break. But for now, there's just so you know, you can go back and add more perimeters. But having it grayed over the top of it really isn't maybe what we want. So let's go and do a little style change. The way that we do that, we'll go down to options, click options, and then you'll see the little gray style, change style. If you hover it over it, the box, click on that. And the fill, we actually will want to have fairly transparent, mostly transparent maybe. And the outline, let's make that not transparent. And let's make it like black, something dark, so it really pops out. You can also, you can change colors and so forth, but I'm just going with this just to be simple, just for to accent the burned area. And then I'll click OK. And look at that now. Now you have something that looks kind of pretty, right? So now we have locations. Okay, we have to, oh, by the way, we have to click OK and we have to click done or that'll be lost. The perimeter data up top is good. I might want to bring up the, let's see, nearest facilities just so you can see it a little bit more or not. Maybe it's not ideal there. Yeah, so you have that data there. So now, but we're starting to have a rudimentarily kind of decent map. And with that said, let's take a pause to see if there's any questions and to then take a break. So let me look in the chat real quick if I can find it, because I have so many things open on here. Where is my chat? Come on. There we go. Yeah, so Andy notes, yeah, 5,000 credits will go a very long way. Okay, so there's public transportation routes instead of driving routes between locations. That I'd have to experiment with. So the question, yeah, so is there a way to use this analysis function for public transportation routes? I don't know. I think is the answer. I'd have to play with it to see if there's a way to do that, to tease that out. I don't think there is automatically, but there might be a way.
We'll be back in spring, so make sure you don't get his course in spring.
Do we need to extract the folder before uploading it?
No, you actually, no, you, the opposite. You want to leave it as a zip file and then upload it as this. You need to bring in the zipped file. It has to be zipped.
Okay.
And so all of the content you need is already in there. That's kind of what I was talking about with the, it's kind of convenient the way it's set up. So by default, you don't have to do it when it comes out of that FTP site.
I see. Thank you.
Good. All right, let's reconvene at 3:25. I see that Maggie already answered some of the credits questions. Excellent. So yeah. Oh, someone asked, how do you make a polygon with no fill and an outline? I'll do that really quick one more time. So I'll just click on one of these for style, because this is a a polygon with no fill and outline. Okay, I'll go to instead, go to the county layer. Style. If you're still watching. Options. Symbol. So with no fill, what you would do is for the fill, you just turn transparency to 100% 0. And then the outline to make sure the transparency is 0. And so then, so fill is 100% transparent and outline is not. And that's how you could do that. So for Karina, that's the answer there. Good. All right. See you back in about 4 or 5 minutes. All right. Get going again here. All right. We're coming right down to the end or the final stretch right now. That's good. And in fact, this time, I think we're going to have a little bit of time for you all to play around and ask questions and that sort of thing at the very end, because there's trying to set the pace. So there you have that. We have that time to do that. So the next things we're going to do, I can do all of this from memory easily enough, is how to do a little bit of just cleaning up the cartographic effects, setting things up for a web mapping application, and showing you how that you could put this into a website, for example, or you can just take your web map and send it to someone with some publishing options. So I'm going to do that. But for right now, and as we have been going through this exercise, I even noted a couple of times that we're doing a couple of things that's slightly out of order. And that was the like changing the style of the perimeter, for example, and changing the style of the ANR locations, or sorting out the contents, which let's go back to that if you're not already there. So I'll back out of the style and click done and make sure I'm in my contents again. So everything looks more or less the way that we're looking at it here. The first thing I'd like to mention is that these names don't really necessarily make sense to someone, and any layers that you have in here are going to be available or viewable in your final web map or web mapping application. So you want to have the user of that app be able to understand what they're looking at. So let's change some names to start with. So the first one, the perimeter layer, let's make that so it's not a bunch of numbers and so forth. Let's go down to rename. Scoot back to the beginning. You can have the date. I'm gonna sort this out. You know, you can sort this out any way you kind of want. I'm gonna put in there 09/15/2021. The hours at 8:45 p.m. is when the data came in for this. We can get rid of that. We can get rid of the underscores. You notice there's a lot of underscores with GIS data, and that's because anyone that's been doing GIS for a long time knows that underscores don't play well with certain types of code or functions, and so like long-term GIS users put a lot of underscores in there. But I'm going to change the name of this into something that makes a lot more sense, like Caldor Fire Perimeter. Oops. There we go. Caldor Fire Perimeter, and click OK. And then you see it show up in there, so that makes sense. ANR locations, can maybe change that, just rename that a little bit. Get rid of the underscores. Again, that will show up as underscores in your final stuff. Then we have the Caldor Fire damage layer. So what we could change that name to, because we're not looking at all of the damage structures. We could say we can rename that to Caldor Fire let's see. Or like, see, what was it? Partially damaged structures. Or damaged residents or structures, whichever. This is not going to be like any, you'd want to think out some of these terms, and we could go do that for all of these. You could say route to, but you could change all of these into some kind of clean map, and we have time right now, so I'll just do it. I'm going to rename this into nearest ANR facility to damaged structures. Oh, what the heck? It got rid of all the spaces just now. Or route. And then okay. So see how I'm cleaning up the names. We don't need the counties anymore, so we can remove that. This will all make sense in a moment, you'll see. So we just want to clean up these names. And if you don't want to do this, that's fine. It's not the severity risk. We don't need that. Maybe we can remove that. Next, I think the symbology looks good. By the way, we have spare time at the end. You can go back and play with symbology, add in more layers. You can do some searches for yourself, ask questions. But for now, we'll just set it up like this. We might want to save it now, because once you make some saves or some changes like this, saving is good always. Let's change the base map. And here's the reason for that, is that for something like this, here, I'll back up and I'll tell a little bit of the story of how this came to be or got started as an idea. So if you're, say, down right by the edge of the fire line and you're publishing this map, you don't have any real close reference of where the fire is relative to, say, your local gas station or your house for that matter. And so what you might want to do is change this base map from being this coarse kind of just reference map to something like hybrid imagery. And why that's important is because my property that I own is right off of Steely Ridge Road. And I know for a fact that this map doesn't really it isn't really that exact, because the fire did jump over the road for a ways here because it burned a section of my property over here off of Steely Ridge Road. My dad's property is right over here. It actually burned the about a day and a half after this started, right when this huge, like a large part of this really intense fire happened. It just got roaring and there was fire spots jumping off all over the place. And I woke up at about 3 a.m. with my brother yelling, "Let's get out of here," because there was a fire about, I thought it was closer. It looked closer. It was 800 feet from the house down in this area right here. And the fire burned up to there, and then it turned directions, and then it burned over to this side and burned up to 500 feet from the house. And then a fire spot started on the other side and burned to 1,200 feet of the house. So this is like, this perimeter is actually not exactly like right on. But when I was looking for data for a good up-to-date map, everything was a day or so behind. And when I found the FDP, I was able to get into the IR data and create a map that was within like 2 or 3 hours sometimes of the most recent data that came in. And so I could keep track of how close the fire was. Uh-oh, what happened? How close the fire was after, and did I just lose it? I did. Holy, oh no, not all of it. Oh, since I saved it. Oh, remember, all I did, see, there you go. A glitch in the internet can have you lose your map. All I just have to do is, oops, change my base map back. Save often. So anyhow, in about a few hours, I put up a web map of where the fire was progressing. In about 3 weeks, 92,000 people were using it. So that was, or at least there was that many hits on the map that I just published and shared on Facebook, and then that spread out, and I just kept up on it. And so yeah, there's quite a bit of power in having some kind of in having this skill right here. So I digress. So here we go. We have a decent looking map, I think, in my opinion, or at least a good, fairly good start of a map. Might have to adjust positions or space it a little bit on here, so it's just about right. But so here we have the map. This is usable, I think. So what we want to do is we want to save it again, especially in case it crashes. And let's go into some of the sharing settings. So go to share, click for everybody for right now. I mean, there's no proprietary like sensitive information, but you might want to consider that. Stay here for a second. Some of these houses, and you might be, if there was a reason or a cause, you might not want to be giving the exact location of, say, partially damaged houses. I don't think there's an issue like that. This is all public data anyways. You can get it online from El Dorado County. But I mean, how many people are going to be searching for the tag word junk? So I'm not worried about that. But anyhow, you do want to make sure that you don't have like sensitive data that you're going to publish and put out there for anyone to look at. But that's if you click everyone on this box right here. And then by default, it does everybody in your organization. And I mentioned before, the alternatives of you can do the groups, just like the web map. Once you've shared this, so what we do, it isn't shared yet. We say done. It's kind of a weird thing. If you go back to share again, once it's been shared like that, you can copy this URL, Control C. I need to bring it up in a different web browser just to make sure that it doesn't refresh under my login. And I will put it in there. This, by the way, can just be show and tell. You don't have to follow along with this if you don't want to. You can if you feel like it though, but you'll see it pop up. Might take a minute to draw. There's a fair chunk of data. Yeah, so there you go. You got this, but it is not exactly ideal. I mean, you have a rudimentary, legend over here on the left. It's there's no title much. I mean, there's the name of the map at the top, but it's not really ideal. And to clean that kind of stuff is where you get into the web mapping applications. So this is in a total different browser. So I'm going to reduce this down. But the key thing though is that you could send this URL to your boss, to your mom, to your cousin, whoever, and they can just bring it up, and then they have this map available to them. Or you can paste it on Facebook like I did. You can embed in a website. We won't dive into it. Well, we will, but I'll show you a different way to go about that in a moment. Or you could create a web app that then you can add more widgets and features to it. And there's all these default configurable apps. There's the basic, and I'm just going to go into this, but then I'm going to back out of it because they keep changing these, and it's I say sort of frustrating because I used to love using basic and some of the other ones. Now, if I select it and create a web app, it's I'm just going to give it some random letters. Let's get a junk done. It's not going to give me all of the options for editing it that I want. But this is, I bring this up though, just because it's a really basic way to show the map. You don't have like as much configuration as you might like. You can do map, add in some of the information, go back. I can do about, I can type in information here and add it in there. It gives me a basic map, but it's almost too basic. So I'm going to back out of this. I've actually, there's so many divergent ways can't stress that enough. Lately I've been using Experience Builder a little bit more. It's good for this sort of thing. But then there's the traditional classic map viewer, and then the traditional apps that we were just looking at. And then there's also configurable apps that they've added in here. And what we'll do there is, again, so if everyone gets back to their map here, you can back out. I just wanted to show you that, just to show the that there's a bunch of options under the Create a Web App. All these many options that used to have like story maps in there that now have been removed and are kind of put into a whole nother into another app, the story map builder. There's also the web app builder here. So again, you can do it this way. You can do it this way. You can do it in the map viewer. You can do it in experience viewer, experience builder. You can do it in story maps. And I'm probably missing some other ways you can go about this. But for right now, we'll just go in here. Each one of these things, by the way, is basically its own training session, its own course. So we don't need to go over that. But we'll go into the web app builder. Leave it just the way it is. I'll just go 4 or 5 or something. Just add another number for a title. Get started. A lot of these things, though, there are a lot of similarities. So if you have widgets is a term for adding in things like, I don't know, I'll show you in a second. Things like attribute tables and locations and scale bars and that kind of thing. But theme, you can pick from a number of billboard, box theme, dart. The foldable theme, that's the one I actually like that the best. I'm glad that that's the default. You can go dashboard theme where you can add a bunch of different things around it. That's like just to make your web map look more like almost like a full-fledged website of sorts. You can do the launch theme, but I like the foldable theme. I don't know why they call it foldable, but it works. You can do the map. You can edit things and you can change out your map. You can add in attributes. It already has some things like your scale bars already by default down at the bottom. There's zoom slider. You can we already have a zoom option right here, but you have some variety of widgets. Oh, excuse me. I can do overview. Yeah, it's not letting me do some of these things. But anyhow, so we can add widgets in there. Attributes, the key thing that I usually would work on. You can change the name of the map right here. There's two places that you can change it. So we might just say, we might take out the spaces, AGO. Again, cartographers hate having map in the name of a map. So AGOL, Caldor Fire. Oops. So I can just call that the name of this map, and see it changes at the top. There's also the name of the map up here. So I mentioned earlier that it is nice to have this extra tab that you can work in. And the reason for that is that then you can go back to your maps that you've saved. So you can go to your content. I'm just doing this. You can follow along if you want. If you've done that, if you have that other tab, you can follow along and do this. If you didn't, really don't worry about it. It's not, this is like minutia that we're playing with right here. But we have this, the web map, the training map that we created earlier. I can open that up and then open it in Classic Viewer. The reason why I'm going to this is just to show you how there's some things that must be edited in the actual map that's underlying the web mapping application. So we have the web mapping application here that we're playing with it. We're starting to put in the widgets and so forth. The actual map, though, doesn't have those same options. They look similar, but it's not the same thing. This is what's underlying. This is where we had to change the names and so forth. But one name we also need to change is this. So we could say AGOL, or just, you can just call it Caldor Fire. That's good enough, I guess, for now. And then once I save this, it'll save it. And I go back to here and I refresh it. Oops, cancel. I'm going to save this first. Save it. And then refresh. I thought this would update here. Odd. Because I resaved it. Oh, shoot, I might have saved as another name. Anyways, you have to change this name back in the other map. And why it didn't save. Oh, it's probably because I have to reshare it. But anyway, so that any changes you make at the map symbology and so forth, that'll carry over to this. So we have all of this information done. And again, this is a whole training unto itself. And we can dive back in, come back to that in another workshop. But now that we have it all set up, it's looking fairly good here. I might have to adjust the positions of some things a little bit, but it looks good. Save it one last time. And then let's launch it. And this is what it's going to look like. It'll come in. There you go. And so it looks fairly good. Just a little note up in the top right-hand corner, you also have a drop-down legend that you click and it'll bring down and come back up. Click on this. You can get the, you can turn on and off layers. This is for the user's ability. The users have this. But we have a fairly decent map that now, because we've shared it with everybody, this URL, copy and paste it in here into the other viewer. You don't have to do this. It's just show and tell again. Paste and go to. It looks a lot like the other one, and I'll toggle back and forth so you can see what I mean. But now you have home button, you have my location. I added those widgets. There's like the zoom, there's the legend that's collapsible. So all of this is over here, as opposed to the kind of clunky looking thing that we did if it was just straight web map. So we got the nice, more refined one. And this is, and because this address right here, and you have a nice address, we can add that to a web page if you have some kind of web developer tool. In the case of ANR, we use Site Builder, which I guess is going to get sunsetted pretty soon. But from what I understand, most web development tools are similar like this. Let me see if I go to our Site Builder. Let's see. I thought I had a tab open for that, but I can go back to it. Okay, I guess I don't. That's not a problem. I must have accidentally closed that earlier, but I'll go to it right now. I'm going to go to our ANR portal. I'm already logged in, so don't need most of this information. This is our Site Builder tool. I'm going to go into Edit Site Pages. I already created something for this at the very bottom, AGOL example, just in preparation for this moment. I'm going to go to Content. So what I did is I added an asset. So I clicked on Add Asset. I'll do it again. Add an asset. I'm going to just call this our, I don't know, Caldor Fire. Give it an asset type as an iframe. Show asset title. I don't need to because it's already in the map. Save asset. Now all I have to do is paste that that URL for our map in there, and iframe border, good, update asset. Oops, I had another frame in there. So there's going to be two maps stacked on top of each other. I'll remove one of them. Good. Okay, I thought it would remove it. There it went. There we go. And now view current site. So this is what our ArcGIS website would look with an iframe in there. And by the way, it's sometimes a little slow. You sometimes have to kind of massage the data so it's so it loads a little faster, but here you go. So this could be just an iframe within a website that you could would have available to you, that you could if that's of interest. So very good. So I think that's pretty much covers everything in the exercise directions. I mean, at least all the important stuff. And like I said, I was making sure I was pacing myself so we'd have a little time for questions and answers, or you to play around and or just go and enjoy the rest of your Friday afternoon and your weekend. And yeah, it'd be thank you all for being here today, by the way, and please do fill out the evaluation that Andy will be sending out very shortly. It does mean a lot to us. It shows that it gives us good feedback, lets us improve what we're doing, also kind of validates that we're doing the right thing sometimes, and that it's valuable. And don't forget about the office hours. And yeah, again, thank you all. Maggie, looks like you're muted.
I am muted.
There you go. Awesome.
If anyone wants to ask any questions, we've still got 10 minutes before 4, or tell us how you did, what worked, what would you like to know more about? We're here. Sean and I are just going to sit tight until 4. Yeah. Oh, and the video, we will do a little bit of editing on it, and then Sean will publish it on our YouTube channel and send that link out. So that's actually something we could share here, is our YouTube channel. We've got a bunch of other training videos on there. So let me grab that.
That's a great point. We do have a ton of content on there. A lot of people are starting to look at it too.
Yeah, any thoughts, any questions?
Yeah. You can unmute yourself if you have questions now. We're not on a.
Hey, Sean and Maggie, just a very basic question. This was fantastic. Thank you so much. If I'm really interested in generating maps for written documents, for journal articles, et cetera. I see a lot of this stuff transfers, but is the ArcGIS Pro training session more appropriate for that?
Do you want me to start, Sean?
Go ahead. Yes.
I prefer to do all my journal publication quality maps in Pro. I just find I've got more control over some of the fine tuning, where I put the legend, where I put, all the elements of the map, the symbology. I prefer doing that work in Pro. And a lot of folks, you will see increasingly people just taking screen captures of web maps for publication quality, but they don't really meet my standard. So I tend to do that in Pro.
That's more or less what I was going to say too.
Yeah.
That's Pro is the way to do most of the like finer editing and scaling.
You have a little bit more
so,
design control.
Yes.
In Pro.
And
Yeah.
scale control.
Exactly. Yeah. All kinds of stuff. Color, control.
But it does lead into a good conversation about what the value is one versus the other. And the online maps are just easily available, consumable by anybody. They're dynamic. They're that's the value of that. Something that goes into a publication that's static is kind of the more desktop world.
But I'm starting to see like people publish papers with publication, the maps in the publication, but then the whole publication is basically cited and the data is provided via a web map. So that's starting to happen, which is pretty cool.
Right.
Yeah, I've even seen people take the paper that's published with the maps in the paper, but then create a story map with the data and with more interactive, kind of immersive storytelling about the paper. I think we're really entering a cool place for data publication.
Thanks, guys. And is training session schedules for Pro and others we can find them on your website?
Yeah, let me put that up just real quick.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And while you're doing that, can I ask a question maybe to Sean?
Sure.
We've built a few data layers and have put them into a web map, and we created a dashboard that we're making public for people across the state to use, particularly K-12 school districts. But anyway, I was curious, like we did a dashboard that has the map, you can zoom in and whatnot, and then it's got a variety of boxes that essentially sort of function as those widgets. But we did that in the dashboard tool or whatever, instead of doing the web app builder that you went through, and it looks very similar. So I was just wondering if you could talk about sort of how those function differently, or when you would choose one or the other.
Oh man, there's different reasons. There's sometimes it's just ease of doing it. They can be very, very similar, especially dashboard relative to experience builder. You can make things look very, very close to the same thing. There's a lot of the time it just comes down to what's the easiest to go through, or what's the most efficient to get to.
Or what's
the final
your preference,
product.
maybe?
Yes, your preference. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are little subtle design differences between them that might matter quite a bit to you, depending on how you want to display the data. But
this is another example of Esri kind of having parallel workflows available that is almost more confusing than
yes, I've encountered that reality.
Yes.
So then one other question, like when you, like our dashboard, which is we've now made public, it has a super long URL. Is there the ability to customize that?
There are places that you can squish your URLs in both in ArcGIS, but also in your
Externally.
externally.
I
I have
you
to
could do
go.
like a tiny URL or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Esri does have options to squish URLs in some places, but it's really dependent between app to app. It's not it's not easy to find sometimes. Robert actually Shane Fire is the person I ask when I'm wondering. He's not here today, but he's sometimes available on our office hours, and yeah, he's a guru at all those things. And Robert Johnson, that's here too, is not he knows that stuff pretty well too.
Well, this was very well done. Thank you. I followed along pretty well. I thought your pace, Sean, was really fantastic, and I appreciate, Maggie, your overview. I find like the hardest thing getting into new software is like how do the pieces sort of conceptually arrange, and that's rather than diving into the software. So I greatly appreciate that. So thank you both. Thank you all, actually.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We're thrilled to have you all. I'm glad it was a lot of fun for everybody.
Yes.
Thanks, you guys. Well, take care. Have a great weekend.
Yes.
So all of you, yeah, totally. You guys that are all in the workshop, you are free to go to have let your weekend begin.
And I am going to stop recording right now.
Okay.